Have you ever thought about what would happen if something wasn't found on Earth but had been buried here long before humanity even existed? Not a crash site, not debris from space. Something placed, or left, or hidden so long ago that even the idea of its origin no longer makes sense. This story is about one such discovery, a site that was supposed to be ordinary, a confirmed meteor impact zone studied decades ago, logged and forgotten, until new satellite scans revealed something that should not have been there, a structure deep underground. Too precise to be natural. At first, no one treated it as anything unusual. Meteor impacts often leave irregular formations underground, and technology can sometimes misread density anomalies. The excavation began as a routine verification. The upper soil layers were dry, stable, easy to remove. Nothing suggested danger, nothing suggested anything unusual at all. But as they went deeper, the readings started to change. Not randomly, not inconsistently, but in a way that suggested structure, purpose. The object below was not scattered. It was continuous, whole, and far too large for what anyone expected. When they reached the first solid surface, the equipment began to fail in subtle ways. Cutting tools dulled almost instantly. Drills slipped as if the material refused to be engaged. It was not hardness in the conventional sense. It was resistance without friction, without damage. The surface itself absorbed impact rather than reacting to it. It was dark, almost featureless, reflecting no light. There were no seams, no fractures, no signs of natural formation. It did not behave like rock. It did not behave like metal. It behaved like something designed to remain untouched. The excavation was expanded carefully to determine the shape. What they expected was a fragment, a remnant of a larger impact event. But what they uncovered instead was structure. Long, continuous planes extending laterally beyond the initial site. Clean edges appeared where there should have been fractures. It suggested geometry, not chaos. It suggested design. The deeper they went, the more it became clear that they were not uncovering a buried object. They were uncovering a boundary, a surface of something that extended far beyond the limits of the excavation itself. The first irregularity appeared at night, almost unnoticed. Measurements recorded before shutdown did not match those taken the following morning. The difference was small, almost dismissible. Slight changes in depth, minor shifts in angle, soil that appeared partially redistributed. At first, it was blamed on natural settling or measurement error, but it repeated, night after night. The trench was not stable, it was not static, it was changing, slowly, subtly, as if something beneath the surface was correcting the excavation in reverse. To eliminate uncertainty, fixed reference markers were installed, laser points, anchored equipment, controlled measurement systems that should have removed any possibility of error. But the discrepancies continued, not large enough to be immediately alarming, not dramatic enough to trigger emergency protocols, yet impossible to ignore. The excavation was not collapsing. It was not eroding. It was being adjusted. The geometry of the site was subtly shifting each night, as if the structure beneath the ground was responding to their presence. As more of the structure was exposed, its scale became increasingly unclear. It did not diminish as expected. Instead, it appeared to extend further than excavation limits allowed. Every attempt to map its boundaries resulted in incomplete data. It was as if the object existed beyond measurable space. What had been assumed to be a single buried mass now resembled only a portion of something vastly larger, something that could not be fully contained within physical observation, something that did not end where they expected it to end. The first disappearance occurred during the night shift. One of the workers left his designated area and moved toward the excavation site. Surveillance footage captured every step. There was no hesitation, no indication of distress. He descended into the trench and approached the exposed surface. Then, without impact, without visible transition, he simply ceased to appear in the frame. There was no fall, no disturbance of soil, no interaction with the environment. One moment he existed within the recording, the next moment he did not. The footage was reviewed repeatedly under enhanced analysis. Frame-by-frame examination revealed no distortion, no system failure, no interruption in recording. The environment remained unchanged. The ground was undisturbed. The structure was static. There was no visible mechanism that could explain the disappearance. It was not an accident. It was not concealment. It was removal without effect. As if the individual had been taken out of the system entirely without altering anything around him. After the incident, the excavation site lost its sense of normal operation. Work slowed significantly. Movement became cautious, coordinated, hesitant. Yet no official shutdown was ordered. The investigation continued under increased observation. The goal remained unchanged: identify the nature of the structure. But uncertainty began to dominate every action. The presence of something unexplainable beneath the ground was no longer theoretical. It was observable. And it was not passive. A full scan was conducted the following morning. The results arrived within hours. For the first time, the complete structure was mapped with clarity. And what appeared on the analysis did not match what had been physically uncovered. The scan showed not mass, but absence. A defined hollow region beneath the ground, perfectly shaped, precisely matching the excavation area. The object was no longer present in the way it had been understood. It was not material, it was a void. Previous scans had consistently indicated density, physical presence, structural mass, but this final result showed none of it, only empty space. As if the act of exposing the structure had altered its fundamental state, or removed it entirely from measurable reality. There was no explanation for how a formation of that scale could disappear without affecting the surrounding geological layers. No collapse, no displacement, only absence contained within the exact boundaries of what had been excavated. The excavation was officially terminated shortly after. Equipment was removed, the site was sealed, reports were rewritten to describe instability and procedural risk. No mention was made of the final scan results in public documentation. No explanation was provided for the recorded disappearance. The event was classified and archived, but not everything was fully contained. Some recordings remained outside official control, and they revealed something that had not been acknowledged. In the final night recordings, after the scan confirmed the void, motion was still visible within the trench. A shape stood at the bottom of the excavation site, exactly where the structure had been. It was indistinct, not fully defined, but stable enough to be recorded across multiple frames. It did not interact with the environment. It did not move in any recognizable way. It simply remained in place, facing upward toward the surface, toward the observers above. There was no continuation of action, no escalation, only stillness. Then, without transition or visible mechanism, the shape was gone. The disappearance mirrored the earlier incident. No disturbance of ground, no shift in camera focus, no interruption in recording, just absence once again. The pattern was now undeniable. Whatever had been beneath the ground was not simply being uncovered. It was reacting, and it was no longer consistently present in any stable form. Within days, the site was fully buried. Access was restricted permanently. Official statements concluded natural instability and procedural error. No further investigation was approved. But the data that remained suggested a different interpretation. The structure had never behaved like an inert object. It had responded to observation, excavation, and exposure. And with each step of uncovering it, its measurable existence had become less certain, not more defined. The final conclusion: never included in official reports, was based on comparative analysis of all scans. Early data showed presence. Later data showed reduction. Final data showed absence. And yet, physical excavation confirmed that something had always been there during the process itself. The only consistent pattern was change, not destruction, not decay, but transition. As if the act of revealing it had altered its state rather than exposing it. What remained unclear was whether anything had actually been discovered at all, because the final interpretation suggested something far more unsettling. They had not uncovered an object buried in the ground. They had uncovered a location where something had once been, and by excavating it fully, they may have completed the process that allowed it to no longer remain. There was no final confirmation, no definitive explanation, only data that contradicted itself at every stage, presence that became absence, structure that became void, and recordings that show something briefly returning only when everything else had been completed. And in the end, the only consistent fact was this: whatever had been beneath the ground did not remain there. It left when it was fully exposed.